Hi everyone. So I'm thrilled to introduce you all to welcome in today's webinar, and it's my pleasure also to introduce our esteemed speaker Rutuparna. She is the trading manager at ETS. With her extensive expertise and TOEFL and GRE preparation, Rutuparna has been guiding force in developing and leveraging digital platform to enhance the learning experience, and also her passion for education and commitment to helping students achieve their goals and make her the invaluable resources in the field of exam training. So today she will be sharing her insights and strategies to help you excel in your test preparation. So now over to you, Rutuparna. You can start now.
Thank you, Kajal. Hi, everyone. Good evening. Um, my name is Rutuparna. I take care of the training vertical at ETS India. I work as training assistant manager, and I take care of both our products, which are GRE and TOEFL. Today, I'll be taking you through a little bit of TOEFL first, right? I'll tell you what all the test is about, what are the different kind of sections that are tested in the TOEFL IBT exam. And then we are going to go ahead and dive deep into the GRE general test. We'll also see an overlap in GRE and TOEFL. And you'll also get to understand that if you are somebody who's preparing for the GRE, then you will also find TOEFL very, very easy, right? TOEFL is going to be a cake work for you. So because most of the questions that are tested in GRE are also tested in TOEFL. It's just that the level of both these tests differ. GRE is a graduate level examination, which is why it tests you on harder questions, and TOEFL is just an English proficiency test, which tests you on very basic questions that you'll find very, very easy to answer. Right. Without much ado, I will share my screen with all of you. Okay, here you go. So first, like I said, um, uh, we'll talk about the TOEFL IBT first, and then we'll move on to GRE. So the TOEFL IBT test is accepted and preferred worldwide. We're accepted in 13,000 plus institutions in over 160 plus countries. There are two modes to the test. You can take it at a test center. You can also take it at home, which is called a home edition test. And you will get your score reports in as less as 4 to 8 days. All right. So the TOEFL basically measures the ability to communicate by combining all four language skills, which are reading, listening, speaking, and writing. Um, it is academically focused, measuring proficiency in English as it is used in academic settings. Right. So TOEFL IBT is an academic test, and there is just one test, right? There's no general and academic as you might have seen in other standardized tests. The scoring is very, very fair and very, very objective because the test is not scored at test centers. And these are scored at centralized scoring network. And the crucial speaking section involves two graders, a human grader as well as an AI grader, right? So you get the best of both worlds, and we also ensure that the scoring is accurate for all the sections, right? Um, Apart from that, what else do you need to know as a test taker is the overview of the test, right? You need to have a clear idea about what kind of questions are tested in how many sections and what is going to be the time limit for all these questions or all these sections, and what is going to be the scoring for all these sections, right? So like we have already established, there are going to be about 4 sections, which is reading, listening, speaking, and writing. And remember that the sections will always appear in this particular order. So in the reading section, you will get 2 reading passages with 10 questions based on each passage. So that means you will have to answer a total of 20 questions in 35 minutes. And the scoring remains the same for all the 4 sections, right? So the score ranges from 0 to 30, 0 being the lowest and 30 being the highest. Next up in the listening section, you have 3 lectures 6 questions based on each lecture. And you also get 2 conversations with 5 questions based on each conversation. So in the listening section, you will have to answer a total of 28 questions in 36 minutes, right? Here also the scoring remains the same. Next up, we have the speaking section where there are 4 questions that are designed for the section, 1 independent task and 3 integrated tasks. The speaking section is allotted 16 minutes in total, and the scoring remains the same here as well. As in when we move forward, I will just tell you about what each of these question tests you on and what is going to be the task that we expect from you for all of these questions, right? Similarly, in the writing section, you have 2 questions that are designed for the section, 1 integrated writing task and 1 writing for an academic discussion task. And the writing section is allotted a total of 29 minutes. And the scoring, like I said, remains same here as well. So that makes up for the total score of TOEFL IBT as 120. And there's no negative marking in the TOEFL IBT, and there's nothing called a, passing or a failing score. So it depends on the kind of, on what university or college you're applying to. All right. Now, when I move forward, I'm going to establish the fact that reading and listening are very, very similar sections in terms of the questions that are asked. Similarly, you'll find a lot of similarities in the speaking and writing sections because the questions that are asked for in these sections are going to be pretty similar to each other. Now, when we move on to the reading section, you know that you get 2 reading passages, right? Now, each of the reading passages are going to be about 700 words long, and these are always going to be followed by 10 questions for each passage. Now, most of the questions are worth 1 point, but it's the last question in each set, which is worth 2 points. And that question also carries partial scoring. So if I just have to look at the question types, if you can look at my screen, then you'll see that the questions are divided into 3 categories, right? Basic comprehension, inference, and reading to learn. So I'll just take some time here to make you understand as to how these questions are framed and designed. So guys, any kind of reading will happen in 3 stages, right? So first you read for basic comprehension, right? If I give you a newspaper to read, the first thing that you'll read for is the headline, right? Now, by reading the headline, you will get an idea about what is this whole passage about or this article about, right? So that gives you an idea of the outline of the article or the passage. So that is called reading for basic comprehension. Then you read for specific details, which are specific purpose questions. And then we do something else. We do infer something which is not explicitly stated in the passage, but we have all the proof that we need in the passage, and we have to sort of base it on our intellectual understanding and also base it on the context of the passage to find out what is the hidden meaning, right? So those are called inference questions. So remember that basic comprehension questions include 4 types of questions in the TOEFL IBT, which is vocabulary, which tests you on how well you understand contextual word or contextual meaning of the word from the given passage, which is something that also gets tested in GRE, right? Next, you have something called sentence simplification, which tests you on how well you understand paraphrasing, right? You also have something called factual question, which will ask you to find out a fact from the options. And you also have a negative fact question, which will ask you to find out a negative fact, something that is not supported by the passage, right? And that's what you have to find from the options. So answering basic comprehension questions are always going to be easy because these answers are always very explicitly stated in the passage. However, in inference questions, you might find it a little challenging initially because in GRE also I get a lot of queries right, from test takers that inference questions are hard. It's not hard, it's just that we tend to overthink a lot when it comes to inference questions. So don't overthink, and be very straightforward and direct in your approach when you're dealing with an inference questions, and you will get the answer, right? So inference question is something which is also tested in the GRE. So under inference, you have content inference, you have rhetorical purpose, you have insert text. Um, these are basically questions which will ask you about what the author has implied in the text, but not really something that is explicitly stated in the text, right? Then you have something called a prose summary question. Now, as the name suggests, it is going to be a summary question, right? Now, this question is always the last question in each of the passage. It is always the 10th question, and this question carries 2 marks. All right. Question number 1 to question number 9, all the questions will carry 1 mark or 1 point, but the last question in each set, which is a pro summary question, it is worth 2 marks and it carries partial scoring. So for a pro summary question, you will always get 6 options, whereas for all the other 9 questions, you will get 4 options. So for all the first 9 questions, the number of correct answers are going to be 1. But when it comes to a pro summary question, you will have to find out 3 correct options out of the 6 options that you're given. So if you are able to come up with all the 3 correct options, then you'll get the full mark, which is 2. If you are able to come up with 2 correct answers, then you will get half a mark, which is 1. If you get anything less than 2 correct answers, then you will not get any scoring, right? You'll get a 0. So that is how the partial scoring works for a pro summary question, right? I just will give you um, just a minute to just go through the questions. These are some of those questions that are tested in the reading section. Just take a look at it and you will understand which questions, are questions that you find easy or you find difficult, which one is a vocabulary question, which one is a factual question, which one is an inference question, and all of these things, right? So just to give you an idea of what a vocabulary question, you know, uh, appears like, I will give you an example here, right? I'll give you a minute to look at the question and you can tell me the answer in the chat box. So if you can look at the question, it says in the animal world, the task of moving about is fulfilled in many ways. For some animals, locomotion is accomplished by changes in body shape. So the word locomotion in the passage is closest in meaning to word, right? That is what you're asked. Uh, Now, always remember that you have to find out the insight for such questions. For any questions that is a reading comprehension question from the passage itself, do not entertain your assumption or any kind of information which the passage doesn't have any proof of. Any question or any option that makes use of information from outside, do not entertain those options because those options are distractors and you may fall for them. Always remember that a reading comprehension question will always require proof from the passage. If a certain answer choice doesn't have proof, then it cannot be the correct answer. All right. So the answer to this question here is going to be movement. Got it? So that was just one of the example of a vocabulary question from the TOEFL IBT test. And as you can understand that the level of vocabulary that TOEFL tests you on is going to be very basic, right? So once you prepare for the GRE with high frequency and advanced vocabulary, you will find TOEFL vocabulary to be a cakewalk. Similarly, when we go to the listening section, I'll just tell you what all the listening section will of and how similar it is going to be in terms of the questions that are asked. So you get two types of audios in the listening section. One is going to be a lecture, which are academic lectures. So you'll get 3 lectures, and each lecture will be followed by 6 questions. Remember that the length of these lectures are going to be about 4 to 6 minutes, right? 5 minutes on an average. Um, and then you get a informal campus conversation, and you get 2 conversations. So each conversation is followed by 5 questions, and the approximate length of these conversations are going to be about 3 minutes long, right? In the listening section, most questions are worth 1 point, but then there will be, or there may be, questions sometimes which will require you to come up with 2 correct answers, and those questions do not carry any partial scoring. So in the listening section, what is important? What's important is for you to retain the information that is going to be shared with you, because we are talking about at least 20 minutes of listening time, and in 20 minutes a lot of information is going to be shared with you, which is what you have to consume. So to make sure that you don't forget, or you don't miss out on any major detail or any supporting detail, you have to take down notes, right? So note taking is one skill which is going to save the day in the listening section. But along with note taking, you also have to make sure that you are actively listening to the audio, right? So if you're only focused on note taking, it will uh, take away your attention from listening to the audio properly, because some questions will ask you questions based on the speaker's intonation, which is why listening actively becomes very, very important as well. So there are going to be 2 type of questions. One type of question will heavily rely on how well you have taken down notes, and some questions will heavily rely on how well you have listened to the audio. Now, I was talking about the question types, right? And I was talking about how similar the questions are going to be in with respect to the reading section. So any kind of reading and any kind of listening happens also in 3 stages. So first you listen for basic comprehension, where you try to gather as to what is it you're hearing about. Then you try to listen for specific details, and then you try to listen for inference, right? So inference questions in the listening section are always going to be based on the speaker's intonation. Intonation is nothing but voice modulation, right? So here also you can look at the question types in the listening section. So you get main idea or gist content question. You also get a gist purpose question. You also get a supporting detail question, right? You get inference questions as well, which is called as connecting information in the listening section. And you get some fact-based questions, which are function questions and speaker's attitude, right? Now, remember, there's a short little trick which you can follow when you're listening to the audios. When you listen to a lecture, know what you're listening for. The first question is always going to be a gist content question, a question that will ask you, what is the lecture mainly about? Right? So when you're listening, you know exactly what you're listening for. In the first uh, minute or so, the main idea of the lecture will be delivered, and after that, you can expect the supporting details to be stated first, right? Now, when you're listening to a conversation, the first question in a conversation is always going to be a gist purpose question. That means, why does the student go to meet so and so person, right? So these are the kind of questions you can expect in the listening section, along with other questions like inference and specific purpose details, right? We'll move on to the speaking section. And in speaking, we have 4 tasks or 4 questions that are designed for the section. Um, there is one independent task about familiar topics, and there are 3 integrated tasks. I'll tell you what is going to be the difference between an independent task and an integrated task. So, for an independent task, you need to give your opinion on a certain topic that will be given to you in the question, right? So, whenever you are dealing with any kind of opinion based task, now this you can also try to think about the AWS section of the GRE, which requires you to write an essay, which is going to be an issue essay. And in that essay, you need to give your opinion on a certain topic, right? So what's that one thing that you definitely should know while dealing with an independent question is that you always have to choose one side and then stick to it. Never try to address both the sides. If you do that, it basically shows that you lack critical reasoning skills and that you're indecisive and you're not addressing to the task of the question very, very clearly. Right? So always choose one particular side, understanding that no side is a bad side or a wrong side, right? It is whatever side you choose, try to back it up with the best of the examples that you have got. Now, when we are talking about examples in the TOEFL IBT test, we are talking about very simple, very easy, and very basic examples. However, in the GRE, the AWSA requires solid examples and very compelling examples from all of you, because GRE is a very high level test. All right. But in TOEFL, you can give as simple examples as you can, and it will ensure that you get a full score. But like I said, you have to make sure that you state examples for any kind of opinion based task, because without examples, no opinion is going to be a convincing opinion. So that was about independent task. What about the integrated task? In the integrated task, the task is about integration, right? Now, what do you mean by integration? Integration is basically fusing information together, right? Here, you will receive resources. That means you don't have to think anything on your own, right? Whatever you need to make up for the response, or anything and everything that should make up for the response, is given to you in the form of written and oral resources, right? So for the first two integrated tasks, you will receive a reading article, which is going to be a very short article, and then you will hear a conversation based on the same article. In that conversation, one of the speakers will give his or her own point of view or opinion, right? So even though in the integrated task you are not giving your own opinion, but remember that it becomes important for you to state the speaker's opinion from the conversation, by clearly stating if the man or the woman agrees with the reading article or disagrees with the reading article. Anything and everything else will be paraphrased, right? So paraphrasing is one skill that you are getting tested on through integrated tasks. What do you mean by paraphrases? Restate the same things which are given to you. Don't try to copy the sentences as it is. So that is for the first two integrated tasks, which are exactly the same. Now, the last integrated task doesn't require you to read any kind of article. It just requires you to listen to a lecture, which is going to be a 2-minute lecture. And in that lecture, a term or a concept will be explained to you. And all that you have to do is summarize the lecture in your own words, maintaining certain keywords. All right. So that is going to be the task in the integrated section. So in independent task, you give your own opinion on the topic, which is where you can think about outside examples. But in integrated tasks, you're going to just summarize the topic, and you're never going to entertain any kind of outside information which the resources do not, consist of. So that's something that you need to know about the speaking section. When it comes to the writing section, it is very, very similar to the speaking section, because in writing also we have one integrated task and we have one academic discussion task, which is basically an independent writing task, which requires your opinion on the topic. So similarly, in the writing integrated task, what you will get is you will get a reading passage of about 300 words, which you will read for 3 minutes first. Then you're going to listen to a lecture of about 2 minutes long. And that lecture will almost always will have a contrasting perspective with respect to the passage. Right now, whatever pointers are made in integrated tasks, be it speaking or writing, you'll always find yourself, you'll always see that three major pointers are given, right? Along with the supporting details for each of those pointers. Now, your job is to paraphrase and summarize all those 3 pointers, right? And talk about all the supporting details the speakers have provided in the lecture. Got it? Now, in the integrated writing task, the only difference in writing and speaking is that in the speaking section you are speaking, and in the writing section you have to type your response, right? Now, A very good trick here is in the integrated writing task, always make sure to write 4 paragraphs, one introduction, which is going to be a very simple introduction of what is the topic about. And then each of those 3 pointers will make up for one body paragraph each, where you need to mention the speaker's opinion from the lecture, stating that either the speaker agrees or disagrees, and what is the kind of supporting detail the speaker has included to support his or her pointers, right? So that is what the integrated task tests you on. Again, very paraphrasing is a skill that you have to uh, develop. Now, next one is called a writing for an academic discussion task, which is a very short task, right? It just requires 10 minutes. And in 10 minutes, you will have to write 100 words. It requires your opinion on the topic, right? Anything else is same as the speaking section. Make sure that you use transitions, you use idiomatic speeches. Transitions are words like, for example, on the other hand, therefore, hence. So when you are mindful about using these tiny little details, your response will become a very mature response. And yeah, it's going to look polished basically. So the effective response in task 2 will contain 100 words, and you just get 10 minutes to write 100 words, which is a lot. And in the first task, an effective task response will contain about 150 to 225 words. And to do that, you get 20 minutes. So you will have to type about 150, 60 words in 20 minutes, which is not gonna be an difficult task at all. All right. So that was all about the TOEFL IBT test in short, of course. Whatever you need to know as of now to kickstart your journey for preparing for the TOEFL. Now, as and when we move forward to the GRE section, you will find a lot of similarity in GRE with respect to TOEFL as well. But like I said, the level of response that we expect in GRE is going to be much higher than the TOEFL IBT test. So having said that, I am showing you certain transition words that you can take a picture of, and it is going to help you both in GRE as well as TOEFL. All right, so these are some of those resources that we have, which is a TOEFL IBT beginner's guide. You also have official TOEFL IBT guide. You also have a portal called TOEFL Test Ready, which is an absolutely free portal. All you need to do is you need to create an account for yourself in ETS. If once you have an ETS account, you will be able to access this portal for absolutely free. So moving on to the GRE general test. So if I talk about GRE, it is a hugely and widely accepted test, and it is a graduate level test, right? So it is accepted by 20,000 plus graduate business and law programs. Institutions, government agencies, organizations, and foundations offer fellowships and scholarships as well. So you get full funded scholarships for GRE as well. The GRE stands for Graduate Record Examination, which is what you take when you want to study abroad for your MS, or you can do your MBAs, you can do any kind of law programs or fellowship programs that you wish to. So the GRE consists of 3 sections. The first section is going to be the analytical writing assessment section. This section requires you to write an essay, which is called Analyze an Issue Essay. And this section ranges from 0 to 6 in half-point increments. When I say half-point increments, what I mean is you will get your scores something like 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5, like that. But remember that 4 is considered a good score on the AWA section. Anything above 4 is considered great. Anything below 4 will basically demonstrate what all the essay or your response is lacking in. Now, the score for the AWA section is not included in the actual score of GRE, which is 340. What comprises of that score are 2 sections: verbal reasoning section and quantitative reasoning section, both of which range individually from 130 to 170, 130 being being the lowest and 170 being the highest, in full point increments or 1 point increment. What that means is each and every question will contribute for 1 mark or 1 point, right? A huge advantage when it comes to the GRE is that there is no negative marking in the GRE. Um, so that tells you that it's always a good idea to guess the answer for a particular question rather than leaving it unanswered, right? So the scores are provided to both test takers and score recipients. GRE team advises against adding scores together as each score represents proficiency in a particular set of skills. The validity of GRE scores are going to be 5 years. It's going to be 5 years, which provides individuals a huge flexibility in terms of, when you want to pursue your higher studies. This is how the test is structured. Like we have said, there are three sections: AWA, verbal reasoning, and quantitative reasoning. Remember that the AWA section is always the first section in the GRE, in which requires you to write one essay, and to do that you get 30 minutes. I'll tell you how to bifurcate or divide these 30 minutes for more proficiency. Now, in verbal reasoning and quantitative reasoning, you will have to write two sections in each, where the number of questions remain the same, which is 12 questions and 15 questions respectively for section 1 and section 2 in both verbal and quantitative reasoning sections. However, what changes is the time that is allotted for verbal reasoning and quantitative reasoning. For verbal, you get 18 minutes to finish 12 questions in the first section, and you get 23 minutes to finish 15 questions in the second section. However, for quantitative reasoning, you will get something extra, right? You get 3 more minutes extra than what you get in verbal reasoning section. So you get 21 minutes and 26 minutes respectively to finish section 1 and section 2. So that makes up for the total testing time of about 1 hour and 58 minutes. As you know, that GRE used to be a very long test in the past, but from September 2023 we have undergone a huge modification, and the test has been shortened now, which is just about a 2 hour test, or 1 hour and 58 minutes to be precise. Now, analytical writing always comes first, just to reiterate, and then these sections will come in any random order. Now, the GRE is section adaptive, right? What does section adaptiveness mean? Section adaptiveness means that how you perform in one section, or the first section, will sort of define what kind of a section you will get next, right? All the sections will contain mixed bag of questions. When I say mixed bag of questions, I mean that questions will come from all levels. There will be some easy questions, there'll be some medium questions, there'll be some harder level difficulty questions, all thrown together. So if you are able to, get almost all the questions correctly, then the next section that you get will also contain harder questions, but that will also make sure that your score is going up. Um, but if you don't do very well in the first section, that means the next section that you get will contain easy questions, but that will also make sure that your score is going low, right? So it's imperative for all of you to do very, very well in the first section, because from that point onwards, you're making sure that your overall score in the GRE is going to be a good score. So the harder the question, the better the score. That is how it works. So I'll just read out: the verbal reasoning and quantitative reasoning sections are adaptive, meaning that the computer selects a second section of a measure based on your performance on the first section. Within each section, all questions contribute equally to your final score. Both sections are important, since the final score on each measure is based on the total number of correct answers and the level of difficulty of the question. So even though all the questions will contribute for 1 mark or 1 point, it's the level of difficulty of the questions that also plays a role in defining how high or how low your score can be. So that was some basic and generic info about the GRE general test. Now let's move into the actual sections, and let's try to understand what all we get tested on, what are the things we need to take care of. All right. So the analytical writing section evaluates a candidate's ability to how well you can articulate and support complex ideas, how well you can sustain a well-focused and coherent discussion, and how well you can maintain the control the elements of standard written English, right? Now, remember that it does not test any content specific knowledge. That means most of the issues that you will get will be issues which are generic and something that you will be able to write. But before I, discuss about the AWS section, I want to make something very, very clear that if you are someone who doesn't already read the newspaper and you are thinking of writing the GRE, I would suggest please start reading the newspaper on a daily basis. If you do that, it helps you get exposed to a lot of vocabulary. It helps you understanding a lot of sentence structure. It helps you understand uh, what is happening overall globally, internationally, which will help you, frame examples in the AWS section. All right. So reading newspaper is going to expand your horizon like nothing else will. So yes, the analytical writing assessment section assesses critical thinking and analytical writing skills. There is just one time writing task. It requires the test taker to analyze an issue, um, um, and to give your examples to support the position that you have taken. Now, essay responses are typed. Basic functions include insert text, delete text, cut and paste, and undo the previous action. But you will not have any grammar checker or any spell checker. That means it's important for you to understand that you need to have some time left so that you can proofread the essay and sort of try to rectify whatever grammatical mistakes and spelling mistakes you have made. So there's one thing I want to tell you here is that in TOEFL, if your response has some minor lapses, some spelling errors or some grammatical errors or some kind of lapses, right? Even in speaking or writing, you will still be able to get a full score if there is an intelligibility in your response. That means if your response is comprehensible, if it makes sense, and if it addresses the question well, then you will definitely get a good score or a full score, even if your response may have some minor lapses. However, in the GRE, to get a full score, you have to sort of ensure that there are very few errors, right? When I say few, it has to be really few. And doesn't mean that you cannot make errors, but yes, if your response has many errors or glaring grammatical and spelling errors, then your scores may get affected, right? Um, so there are some general reminders about the analyze and issue task. The test taker must respond to the issue using the specific task directions. You should feel free to accept, reject, or qualify any claim, right? It is your claim or opinion at the end of the day, and you know how to better sort of support your opinion, right? But make sure that in the introduction, you make it very, very clear as to what is the position you have taken, right? So anybody who reads your essay should be able to get an idea as to what is the side the test taker has chosen, right? Same with the grader as well. Remember that there is no right answer. Now, what is going to be the basic structure in the issue essay, right? The same structure that any other kind of essay follows, right? A basic structure which has an introduction, a conclusion, and in between you have body paragraphs. So remember that you have to at least come up with 3 examples, right? And those 3 examples will make up for one body paragraph. If you want to go for the fourth body paragraph, you are very much welcome to do that. If you want to go for the fifth body paragraph, you are very much welcome to do that as well. So it all depends on how fast you can brainstorm, how fast you can think, and how fast you can type your response in the computer, right? So when you do brainstorm, in the first 3 to 4 minutes, try to simplify the topic, because any kind of opinion based topic will have 2 sides, the yes side and the no side. Once you have simplified both the sides, try to brainstorm examples for both the sides, and then try to sort of understand and analyze as to which side of the examples are more solid or more compelling than the other. And that is the side ideally you should write for, right? So remember that in AWA issue essay, the examples will be the life of your essay. So the weaker the examples, the weaker will be your scores. The more compelling the examples, the better will be your score. That is how it works, right? Now, when we talk about examples, it's also important to know that you should write examples or you should state examples which are global and which are universal. Always try to avoid controversial examples or anything that is related to religion. Now, why do we need to, write global examples? What if you think that, an example from Indian mythology will be great by looking at the topic of the essay? But what if the grader is not able to relate to that? That's also something that you have to keep in mind as to who is evaluating these essays. So, American university professor, any American university professor is going to evaluate these essays, and he should be able to know the background of the examples that you're talking about. So, whenever you talk about examples, make sure that they are known to all, right? They're not very area specific or they're not very local. When you do give examples, make sure to give some specifics and background details so that they get to know, the nitty gritties of those examples as well, right? Now, I'm again going to repeat something that I told you in the TOEFL IBT section, that use examples, okay? Use transitions. Transitions or transitional words or transitional phrases are something that's going to give your response a nice shape. It's going to make your response look very mature and very edgy, right? So try to use transitions at the beginning of each paragraph, right? Firstly, secondly, let's take the example of, similarly, when you go to the second paragraph, you can use transitions like secondly, additionally, similarly. If you want to introduce a contrasting idea, then you can write transitions such as, on the other hand, however, nevertheless, despite, instead. So there are only about 20, 30 examples that you need to know about, and you have to, take a call as to which transition will be great, looking at the topic of your essay. And that is how you need to go about the essay, right? Try to use good vocabulary, the vocabulary that you actually learn for the verbal reasoning section. When you do that, it shows that you have prepared for GRE holistically and not just for the verbal reasoning section. Just because the score for AWA is not included in the verbal reasoning section does not mean that you can skip the section, right? Most universities require you to write the AWA essay. And when you write a good essay, it basically shows that you have prepared for the GRE holistically and not just for any specific part of GRE. Right? So use good vocabulary, use a lot of synonyms. Do not repeat the same words again and again because that will make your essay look very repetitive and monotonous. Um, Always make sure that your conclusion is shorter and it is very concise. When compared to an introduction, a conclusion should never be bigger or lengthier than an introduction. However, you can write a very nice introduction, but I will tell you something very, very honestly, that if you are somebody who reads voraciously, you will be able to write a nice introduction, right? When I say read, I mean, reading good novels where you get exposed to good vocabulary and reading the newspapers, right? Because that's how you will get a lot of ideas. However, if you don't know how to write a good introduction, then just paraphrase the topic in your own words, right? Do not restate everything in the conclusion. Make sure that the conclusion is always short. So the idea is anybody who reads your conclusion should be able to get an idea about what all the essay has touched upon, right? Now, having said all of that, if we talk about the length should be somewhat around 500 to 600 words, even though there's no word limit, right? But to get a good score, you need to write about 500 to 600 words, maintaining everything else: the content, the vocabulary, the grammatical structures, the sentence variety. So if your essay has everything, then you will definitely get a good score. Like I said, a 6 score as well. Right? So score 4, 5, 6 are considered upper half scores, which basically will demonstrate what all the essays um, what all has been done well in the essay, and score 3, 2 and 1 are basically lower half scores, which will demonstrate um, as to what all the essay is lacking in, right? So 4 and anything above 4 is going to be a good score on the AWS section. So these are just some of those tricks and things that you have to keep in mind when you're approaching the analytical writing essay. I'll just give you a minute to go through this, and then we will move on to the reading comprehension passages, and we'll talk about those challenges as well. So 3 stages is what you have to divide your 30 minutes in. First, brainstorm for the first 3 to 4 minutes. Then you actually have to organize and write. You need to proofread your essay, right? So write about 20 minutes, brainstorm of about 5 minutes, and then have 5 minutes left, so that in those 5 minutes you can proofread your essay and avoid any reckless mistakes that you may have made. Always avoid excessive irony or humor. Do not use a lot of jargons. Because that might be misinterpreted by the creator. So these are all the things that I wanted to tell you about the AWS section. However, when we come to the verbal reasoning section, there are basically two type of questions. One of the question type is a question which is based on reading comprehension passages, and the other is related to vocabulary, which requires you to know the meaning of words. Right? So 50% of the questions in each section will come from vocabulary, and the other 50% will come from reading comprehension text. So to accommodate different interests and backgrounds, there is a balance of questions in natural sciences, social sciences, and humanities. Don't worry, you do not need any specific knowledge of the subject to do well in the verbal, especially in the reading comprehension section, right? Now, when it comes to reading comprehension, it works just like TOEFL passages, right? So if you are dealing with GRE, you will be able to do well in TOEFL reading section. If you are someone who's reading for TOEFL reading passages, you'll be able to do well in GRE section as well, right? The questions will vary based on the passages. However, the question types are going to be exactly the same, right? So here also you get gist question, something that will ask you what is the passage all about. You'll also get specific purpose questions, which will come from specific parts of the passage. You'll also get questions which will ask you to infer something from the passage, which are inference questions, right? So same thing here, right? Any kind of answer that you go for, make sure that the answer is well backed up by what is given in the passage, and it is not something that the passage doesn't have proof of, right? Now, there can be different types of questions. You'll get multiple choice questions with one correct answer. You'll also get multiple choice question, which may have more than one correct answer. And you also sometimes may get select a sentence in the passage question. That means this question will carry a certain task description, and you'll have to sort of tell as to which sentence from the passage is matching with the task description, and that is going to be your answer, right? So this is how a traditional multiple choice question with 5 answer choices look like. It'll always have 5 options, and you always need to choose one correct option. Now, test taker should remember that all the necessary information to answer each question is there in the passage itself. Exactly. So when there is a lot of inhibition and a lot of nervousness about reading comprehension passages, because test takers um, find each and everything important, right? So do not bother knowing the meaning of each and every word. Don't read each and every sentence with the same seriousness, right? Do a fast reading or first reading of the passage, and then try to deal with the passage one paragraph at a time. There's a good thing that after the GRE has been shortened, the length of these passages have also been shortened, so we don't get passages in the reading comprehension section which are very, very long now, right? So the passages can be about 300, 350 words maximum now in the GRE. So such a short passage is going to be easy for you to deal with. So always map the questions, right? Sorry, map the passage, uh, deal with the passage first, break it down, analyze it, try to find out which one is the most important information or what is the bigger claim of the passage made by the author. What are some supporting details given by the author to support the main idea, and what does the scope the passage has? Now, that is called working the passage, right? So once you work with the passage and then go to the questions, you will be able to save a lot of time and effort as well, right? But if you keep coming back from the question to the passage, you will find yourself looking for certain keywords which you will find in answer choices. But then when you go for those answer choices as your correct answer, you may not, come up with the best answer, or that option may not be the best answer choice, right? The problem with that is, even if it is a true statement from the passage, it still may not answer your question, right? So what I mean by that is, if you are asked a main idea question, then we know that it's a general question which also requires a general answer, right? Not just a specific answer. So when I'm dealing with main idea questions, then I have to make sure that whatever answer choice I get or find as the correct answer choice should also be all inclusive in nature, which just addresses to the passage as a whole. Similarly, if I'm looking for the answers for a specific purpose question, then I have to look for an answer choice which is specific in nature and not all inclusive, right? And similarly, for inference questions, you will have to dig a little bit deeper, but based on the context of the passage. Do not go beyond the scope of the passage and assume something which is not there in the passage, because that is what we tend to do mostly, right? So when answering reading comprehension questions, test takers should make sure to understand what the question is asking, answer strictly on the basis of what the passage says. They should not rely on outside knowledge. Do not select an answer simply because it is a true statement, and do not select an answer just because it is only partially correct. So sometimes you'll also find answer choices which are half right and half wrong, right? It matches with some part of your prediction, but the other part of your prediction is not stated in that answer choice. So it's always a good idea to have a prediction and then go to the answer choices, because then you have a clear direction and you know what is it you're looking for, right? Otherwise, if we go to the answer choices blindly, then that will not help us, in finding out which one could be our um, accurate answer, right? Because in that state, it'll feel like every answer is the correct answer. So that's something that you have to take care of. So when answering main idea questions, test takers should make sure that the selected answer picks the main idea rather than a subsidiary one. When identifying what the passage says explicitly, test takers should be able to pick out specific portions of the passage that make the relevant statement. And when answering what the passage says implicitly, which are nothing but inference questions, test takers should not be limited by what is stated explicitly, and they should not substitute their own ideas or interpretations. Only stick to what the author is committed to. All right. I also want to talk about something that will help you understand what are some answer choices that you should always let go of or always should eliminate, right? So always rely on elimination. Elimination is key when it comes to GRE and TOEFL reading comprehension both. If you go to the answer choice thinking which could be my correct answer, you'll never get the correct answer. But if you go to the question options and sort of try to eliminate the answer choices that you find irrelevant, something that doesn't make sense at all, then what that does is that it makes your scope very, very limited, and it's going to be easy for you to choose from two options or three options rather than from five options. All right. So what are some of those frequent kind of answers that you get which people or test takers fall for? right? Uh, you'll see a kind of answer choice which uses the same words from the passage or same phrases from the passage just to trap you, right? So just because an answer choice is a true statement from the passage doesn't mean that it's answering your question. There is a possibility that may be coming from a wrong part of the passage. Got it? So never fall for answers where you see certain keywords which are there in the passage, right? Because most of the answer choices will have that. So always be fixated on what is the question asking and what is the answer you are looking for. Always have a prediction. Similarly, you'll also find some of those answer choices which state the opposite of what you're trying to look for. So these are also answer choices that should be obviously eliminated, right? um, Sometimes you'll also see answer choices which uses comparison language, right? Comparison language answer choices are um, also going to be wrong, right? So 9 out of 10 times, right? The author could have mentioned some right two things in the passage but not mention them to necessarily compare. So when you look at two things being compared in the answer choice, take a step back and try to ask yourself whether those two things are compared in the passage or not, right? um, Next, you cannot entertain any kind of answer uh, which uses information from the outside world, something that is not there in the passage. These answer choices are absolutely out of scope. And some of these answer choices could be true, right? Uh, but you think it's true. But when you look for the proof for these answer choices in the passage, there is no proof. That means you cannot take them to be the correct answer. So do not base your answer on what you believe is true, but what the passage says is true, right? So that's something that you have to uh, uh, take care of. So this is again a short passage. Right, this is a very like 100 words passage or so. You can get passages like of this length. You can get passages which has two paragraphs. Like I told you, these passages currently will not exceed more than 300 to 350 words. These are again some of these questions which are tested in the reading comprehension section. um, right, so specific purpose questions. You also get select all that applies questions. That means such questions will always have three options and you have to choose all the options that are true, right? When I say all, it could be just option A that is true, it could be just option A and B that is true. Sometimes it can be all the three options that are true. So you have to select all the answers that the passage has proof of with respect to the question, right? Then you have select a sentence in the passage. This one says select the sentence that distinguishes two ways of integrating rock and classical music. So the task description is that we have to look for a sentence which sort of distinguishes between two kind of music, that is rock and classical, right? And any sentence that matches with this will be the answer for this question. So these are some of those questions that are tested in the reading comprehension section. Now, the other kind of questions are vocabulary based questions. Now, under vocabulary, we have two kind of questions. One is called sentence equivalence and the other is called text completion questions. So I'll tell you what a sentence equivalence question tests you on. It always consists of single sentence with one blank and six answer choices. It always requires you to find the two answer choices that complete the sentence coherently and also produce sentences alike in meaning. So a sentence equivalence question will always have six options to it. You'll always have to find out two correct options. Uh, and there is no partial scoring. That means only when you come up with those two correct options, you will be marked for the question. Otherwise, you'll not be marked. So the idea is even if you put either of the words in the blank, the sentence as a whole should make sense, right? So the two correct answers may not always be synonymous, but sometimes they may be synonyms, right? Um, Again, just to give you a little bit of idea on how to learn words, right? There's no one way of learning words. You can learn words through affixes, you can learn them through root words, you can learn them through word clusters or word families. When you're, well versed with these things, with root words and affixes, Affixes are nothing but prefixes and suffixes. It will help you guess the meaning of words, even if you don't know the meaning of a word in a particular context. But these things will only help you till a point, right? You cannot always guess the meaning. Not all the words, have root words or affixes like that. So the bottom line is you have to learn words, no matter what. So if again, just to repeat, if you are already thinking of writing the GRE and you haven't started your vocabulary learning, I would suggest start today itself, right? Again, so these are also some of those prefixes and suffixes that you can go for. So I'm just giving you a template using which you can study. Like you can see anti, right? Anti is always a prefix which always carries negative connotation, right? Aqua is something which always is associated with water. Bene is something which is always associated with good. So what that means is any word, and most of the words which has these root words or prefixes have a base meaning, right? So antisocial will have a negative meaning. Aquatic will have something which is related to water, right? Benefit, benediction, benevolent, beneficiary, all these words are always words which carries positive connotation or positive meanings. So this is how you can guess words, right? Now I'm showing you a question um, for sentence equivalence. I'll give you a minute to look at the question and I'll show you how to do this question as well. Can everybody see my screen? I would expect some answers from you for this question, and then I also, if you Google the meaning of words, right? Because some of you may have Googled the meaning of these words because you don't know the meaning of these words. I'm telling you, it's not a great way of learning words. The faster you learn, the faster you forget, right? So always try to learn words in contexts, in sentences. That way, the memory retention will be better. Okay, so Prakhar says ephemeral. Deepak also says ephemeral. Guys, remember that this is a sentence equivalence question. And like I told you, you will always have to come up with two correct answers. That's correct. Yes, the correct answers are going to be option A and option D, ephemeral and evanescent, because the word that we are trying to look for is something that is not permanent, right? So how to go about doing this question? So always ask yourself what the blank is focusing on, right? And the insight for that will be lying somewhere in the sentence itself. Again, in these questions also, do not assume something which is not in the sentence, right? This one says, because of the inundation of never-ending news cycles and our decreasing attention spans, most news reports are dash. And then you have a semicolon. When you have a semicolon, you always should read what comes after the semicolon, because there's a possibility and probability that the insight for the blank is lying in what comes after the semicolon or the colon, right? So what does it say? Therefore, for a news report to have any kind of permanence, it has to be particularly exceptional. That means what we are trying to say is that now the news reports are not very permanent. Our attention span is decreasing, and that's why the attention span of these news reports are also decreasing. Something that is short lived, right? So, short lived is the word, then it's going to match with ephemeral and evanescent. Sometimes you can eliminate words in pairs. So, here, Donish and pedantic can be eliminated at once in pairs because both of these are synonyms. So, Donish is somebody who is like very studious. Okay. Same with parochial and insular. They can also be eliminated in pairs because both of these are synonyms, which mean like confined or narrow minded. All right. Similarly, maybe I can just ask you to do this question and we can then move forward to a text completion question. Okay, so Prakhar, you need to give me two answers again, just to remind you. So the correct answers here are going to be an enigma and a paradox, option A and option C, because we are talking about this person called Jeremy Buchanan, who has been described as both a proponent and a dictator. So both of these things are very conflicting, right? Proponent is a good person, something good he's done, but a dictator is a person who inflicts humiliation on servants and expel thousands of immigrants, right? So these both like two conflicting statements coming together is a paradox. And because we are told both, we don't sort of understand what kind of a person he is. Makes him very mysterious, which is sort of match with an enigma, right? So that's how you do a sentence equivalence question. Similarly, when it comes to text completion, please remember that the approach is exactly the same as sentence equivalence question. The only difference is in how the question is in the question format. So a text completion question can come in single blanks where it will have 5 options. It can also come in multiple blank, like the one you see on the screen, where it can have 3 options per blank, and you always have to choose one correct answer, be it a single blank text completion question, be it a set multiple blank text completion question. You always have to choose one correct answer per blank, right? So I'm just going to show you this question and ask you to tell me the answer. And after this, I'm going to open Q&A so you can ask whatever questions you have. Can we have the answer? So it is not mandatory that they are synonyms. No, it's not mandatory, Lakshita. Sometimes they may be, sometimes, but they don't have to be synonyms. Okay, so we have a mixed bag of questions, A, B, C. Okay, am I expecting some more answers? So the correct answer for this question is option A, which is indifferent. All right, because the question says most young children are often dashed to old stories as they are unable to relate to the characters and lifestyles of olden times. So if you go to watch a movie, right, and you don't sort of relate to the story, will you be very happy about it? No. Will you be very sad about it? No. So you'll not have any actual emotion, right? You'll be like somewhere in the middle. And that is exactly what being indifferent means. It means being apathetic, showing no actual emotion. It can't be B, because if you go for B, then you'll also also have to go for D. Sympathetic and empathetic both are the same options, right? So they have to be eliminated in pairs, right, at once. Option C does not make sense here, which is impertinent, which means rude. Sometimes it can also mean irrelevant. Again, makes no sense in the context. And the last one is called ebullient, which means when you are super happy, right? Super joyful, super enthusiastic, which again doesn't make sense in the context. So the only option that makes sense is option A, and it is indifferent. I hope you understood the approach for the vocabulary question types, right? I'm gonna share my stop sharing my screen right now because now I'm gonna open for Q&A. But here, just to give you an added piece of information, guys, please remember that vocabulary questions are always the easiest question to answer. Right? What I mean when I say easy is they work just like maths, right? If you know the meaning of a word, you'll get the answer. If you don't know the meaning, then you can keep guessing. And the guessing doesn't guarantee that you will come up with the answer. So the bottom line is you have to know your words, right? And these are also questions which are very less time consuming. So whatever time you save here, you're going to use up the same time in the reading comprehension section because that requires a lot of analyzing and it takes time, right? So just to give you a rough idea, if you're talking about 12 questions in the first section of verbal, which is allotted 18 minutes. So, and I told you that 50% of the questions, I mean, it's not a said thing, but there's a pattern, right? You can see about 50% of the questions coming from vocabulary. So even if there are like 5 questions that come from vocabulary, you should make sure that you take about 5 to 6 minutes maximum to finish all the vocabulary questions in the section. And then you have 12 minutes, which you can use to, deal with reading comprehension passages where you need to analyze the passage first in the first 3, 4 minutes, and then go to the options to answer your questions. And that will, you'll save a lot of time. All right. So I think with that, I am done with my part of the presentation. I'll open Q&A now. Whatever questions or doubts you have, please feel free to ask. There was a question in the chat. Um, can you tell me free source for TOEFL test? So Deepak, there is a free resource, which is a website that ETS has recently launched. It is called TOEFL Test Ready. What I'll do is I'll put the link for that here in the chat. Just make sure that you have an ETS account for yourself and you will be able to access the portal for absolutely free, where you can get a lot of free materials like free activity of the day, which includes questions from all 4 sections. It also has a mock test that you can take. It also has a customized study plan, which is again cater to your requirements. That also is free. So there are a lot of free stuff you get in this portal. So I suggest you go and visit those. Is GregMath sufficient to go through once, or I should do Magoosh too? You should actually go for all the vocabulary resources and try to learn as many words as you can. Don't leave anything to chance, I would say. Any other questions? Can you please provide some strategies to improve vocabulary? Well, you have to be consistent. Every day you have to spare time for learning vocabulary, 10, 20, whatever is your limit, whatever is, you know, uh, whatever you think you will be able to do, please do those and don't mug up words only. Learn words in sentences. Try to implement the same words in general writing or speaking whenever you're writing or practicing for your AWA essays as well. That way you will be able to retain the word for your entire lifetime. You'll never forget those words. How should we handle complex sentences in reading comprehension? Meaning when the sentence structure is complex, just simplify it. Don't just read what the what the passage already has. Just try to ask yourself, what is the detail that I can take from this sentence? What is this sentence trying to tell me? Just ask yourself simple questions and you will get the simple answers. All you need to do is just find out the details that are provided in each and every sentence. That's all. You don't need to worry about how complex the sentence is. I have scheduled my GRE on October 20th, ma'am. How should I plan my mocks? Ankush, if you still haven't taken the power prep mocks, which ETS has, I would suggest take that. Then you can also go for the paid mock as well. If you're writing on October 28th, then you can write up about 4 to 5 mocks in in this month's time. Ma'am, sorry, I had no network issues. Okay, all right. I think that has been answered. So we from ETS also run free master classes for GRE and TOEFL. Please feel free to attend those as well. You will get a lot of insights. I'm just putting up the feedback form in the chat. Just make sure to fill in your feedback. And yeah, any other questions that you have? I have given old GRE 142 in verbal, so will the score improve compared to last time in general with same hard work? Just make sure that your vocabulary is on point, right? Just learn all the vocabulary that you can. You can learn it from GregMat, you can learn it from Magoosh, you can learn it from, um, you know, um, Word Power Made Easy. There are a lot of vocabulary resources. There are videos on YouTube as well where a certain old man is making videos on high frequency GRE words. Um, right. So make sure that those vocabulary questions are like fixed for you. You have to get those right. So in reading comprehension section, even if you get 1 or 2 questions wrong, it's fine. Your score will still be able to still will be managed, but make sure that you have to get about 9+ questions right in the first section to make sure that the next section will be harder in nature. And if you do the first section amazingly well, your overall score in the GRE will also be great. So to make sure that you get 9+ questions right, you have to make sure that you get all the vocabulary questions correctly. Deepak, I have given the link for TOEFL Test Ready portal in the chat itself. I will just share that with you again. Yes, Lakshita, you can find those information on ets.org. That is our official website. Should I watch your videos available on YouTube? I don't have any videos available on YouTube. With no practice sessions, any advice that can help me score better? No, you have to practice. Without practice, you cannot. Anything other than this? Oh, so Deepak, there is a sample test for TOEFL, which is a mini test about 40 minutes that you can find in the official website, which is ets.org. Any other questions that I can take? Need to know if I fill the GRE and TOEFL together, will I get the test the exam on same day? No, not necessarily. You can choose which date you want to write the test on. I would suggest don't write the test on the same day. You can't be serious for both this test. Don't need no need to take that much pressure, right? All right. I think if we have no questions, we can wind up. Thank you so much for joining this, and I hope you have, derived some insights. What is the total exam cost of GRE? It's 22,500 rupees. Lakshita, I would say just make sure. I think your vocabulary is good based on the answers that you gave. Not that these were very hard questions, but just put a little bit of more effort in reading comprehension questions. Just try to analyze the language of those answer choices. All right.
So thank you, Rutuparna, for sharing your invaluable insights and expertise with us today. So before we wrap up this session, I just want to highlight some exclusive benefits for our webinar to all the attendees who have attended our today's webinar. So first, you all will be receiving the free psychometric test where you can analyze your strengths and weaknesses. And second, you all are going to receive 30 days for free access to the Princeton Review portal for GRE and TOEFL both, where you can get free resources and practice material for both GRE and TOEFL. And third one, you are going to receive 1 hour expert session with the admission expert. And fourth one is going to be a free strategy session. So after this webinar, one of our Manya counsellor will call you to discuss you about all these bonuses. So you can have a conversation about all these benefits. And thank you, Rituparna and Kunal, both of you, for joining us today. And thank you all.
Thank you.